I can see others' remaining lifespans. In the early morning, my father kicked and punched my mother for breaking the house rules. When I woke up to the noise, I saw that the number above my mother's head had turned into a negative. My father continued to scold her in a threatening tone. The house rules are crystal clear. If lunch isn't ready by noon, are you asking for a beating? I stared at my mother, tense and fearful, as her bloodied head from the blurry wounds bled all down her back. Before long, she had managed to lay out a colorful spread on the dinner table. Intestines still dripping with blood, cow's eyes that seemed to stare back in death, a sheep's heart that almost appeared to be still beating, and a blood-stained kitchen knife. After waking at noon, I went to the restroom to splash some cold water on my face and force myself awake. I saw my own lifespan reflected in the mirror. 71,518, which means 71 years, 5 months, and 18 days. Since I was young, I've had the ability to see people's lifespans. Just yesterday it was 71,528. I've somehow lost 10 days overnight. My mother, who works late at night at the breakfast shop with my father, leaves my brother and me at home in the evenings. My brother always wants me to stay up late playing games with him until 6 or 7 in the morning before he sleeps. I turned and looked at my brother, passed out on the couch from exhaustion, sleeping peacefully now, while I had just lost 10 days off my life. I heard the door open abruptly and ran out, hoping to complain to my mother. But she walked straight into the kitchen, ignoring me, carrying several black plastic bags. I followed her, annoyed, and inadvertently saw a chilling number above her head. 0, 0, -1. The drowsiness that had lingered in me vanished in an instant as I struggled to stay upright, using the table for support. I only ever see such numbers above the dead. I had seen a similar number above my grandmother just before her cremation. 0, 0, -7. That was the first and only time I saw a negative number above someone's head until now. Does this mean my mother is already dead? The rhythmic sound of the knife chopping on the cutting board brought me back to my senses. My mother had turned her back to me and was busy at the stove, unaware that the back of her head was a ghastly, bloody mess. I clamped a hand over my mouth, terrified of making a sound. My heart raced with every chop of the knife, fearing the blade would turn on me next. My legs trembled, unable to move. Thankfully, the door opened again and my father returned. Desperate for help, I turned to him, but he cut me off before I could speak. Lazing around at home again? Why haven't you acknowledged the new house rules I posted at 8 this morning? Looking for a beating? Since hearing about popular household rules on the internet, my father tailored one for our family. To ensure every rule favored him, this was already the 5th revision. I was on the verge of tears, but my father wouldn't let me speak. He thrust his phone at me. Read it, and you're not eating until you're finished. I skimmed through the latest revision of the Thompson Family House Rules for 2023, a 22-page document. The essence of the house rules: women are responsible for all housework. Rule 5, men do not enter the kitchen or they will attract demons. Rule 6, women are not allowed at the dining table lest they affect the family's fortunes. Rule 10, each meal must cost between $10 to $15 and include pork, lamb, beef, and chicken to maintain a balanced diet suited to Director Michael's taste. Rule 158, do not call Director Michael by his name directly. Note, violating any rule will result in no less than 30 lashes as punishment. Nodding vigorously, I indicated that I had finished reading, and only then did my father take back his phone. Worried he didn't understand my mother's condition and knowing his temper, I feared he might make things worse. I wanted to warn him, but he had already started eating, saying impatiently, "I'm starving. It's 1 minute past noon, and lunch isn't ready. Are you asking for a beating?" At the same time, my woken brother kicked my leg hard and angrily exclaimed, "Shut up!" My father, holding my brother in his arms, praised him. "Your second sister is just a bookworm. Not like our Director Michael here. He's got real manliness." They laughed heartily. I stood still, feeling entirely out of place. My father called my 5-year-old brother Director Michael and himself Dad, but referred to me and my sister as second sister and big sister. Rubbing my sore leg, I listened to their annoying laughter and suddenly didn't want to interfere anymore. I don't even have a name in this family. What right did I have to remind them? They deserved whatever came to them. Meanwhile, my mother came out of the kitchen with dishes in her hands, amidst the spreading smell of blood. She laid out the colorful hard dishes on the table. Intestines covered in fresh blood, chicken backsides half raw, cow's eyes that seemed unaccepting of their fate, and a sheep's heart that appeared to still be throbbing. Shocked by the sight, my father stood up and retreated several steps, while Director Michael burst into tears. "What is this? Take it away," my father demanded. My mother replied in a stilted tone, "Pork, chicken, lamb, beef, it's all there. Except for the pig intestines, everything was picked up for free from the market, definitely less than $15. It's completely in line with the house rules. Why take it away?" My father's anger shot through the roof at her response. "You call this food? This." He fell silent as he turned and saw the horrific scars on the back of my mother's head. His legs gave out, and he collapsed to the floor, shock stopping Director Michael's cries. My mother approached my father with the bloodied kitchen knife raised high. "Eat it or not?" I saw my father's number drop to 001. A sign of my mother's deadly intent. Secretly, I hoped my father would refuse to eat, but he quickly got up, nodding like a pecking bird. "I'll eat, I'll eat." My mother held the knife aloft until my father, trembling, began to stuff his mouth with the bloodied intestine, mumbling, "Delicious, delicious." Only then did my mother straighten up and put the knife down, her aura of violence dissipating. Seeing this, my father quickly took more bites. The taste was rank, and he almost vomited, but at a look from my mother, he swallowed it back down. Once my mother walked away, my father anxiously turned to me, asking what had happened. Seeing that my mother had no intention of harming me, I started to relax. Instead of running away, I wanted to understand the truth behind my mother's death. Ever since I can remember, whenever I upset my father, he would punish me physically. As I grew older, his punishments escalated from slapping my palms to unbuckling his belt and whipping me all over my body. He did the same to my mother and sister, so my instinct told me that my father must be involved in my mother's death. I asked him what had happened at the breakfast shop since my mother had come home like this. With my prompting, my father thought for a moment before slapping his thigh in anger. I knew there was a reason she laid there for so long without moving. I even scolded her for being lazy and not working. She was dead. His recollection helped me piece together the events. A customer at our sandwich shop had accidentally broken her phone and asked my mother to wait for her husband to pay. My mother, afraid that the customer's husband would hit her for breaking the phone, refused the money and urged the woman to leave quickly. I don't know if the woman was beaten, but my mother certainly was, severely by my father. With only 3 hours of sleep a night and early mornings at the shop, my mother couldn't withstand such a beating. After a few hits, she collapsed. She must have hit her head when she fainted and died at that moment. How she became this walking corpse was a mystery. A chill crept up from the soles of my feet as I pieced together the truth, making me feel like I was plunged into an ice cellar. My resentment toward my father slowly morphed into intense hatred. I wished I could flay him alive. He had been cruel to my sister before and now was merciless to my mother. He was not my father. He was a scoundrel, through and through. As my father continued to force the repulsive food into his mouth, he asked me desperately what he should do. I looked at my dead mother, still doing housework, and said coldly, "What should you do? You should die." My hatred for my father only grew after learning that he had developed a gambling problem in my high school years. He had accumulated massive debts and ultimately did not hesitate to use my sister to repay them. It happened one afternoon during my senior year of high school. Drunk, my father brought several burly men home. By chance, I was on winter break. Without warning, he dragged me in front of these strangers. "Brother Liang, what do you think?" "She'll be pretty when she grows up," my father said, understanding his intentions. I fought ferociously. But it was like trying to stop a car with my bare hands. Futile. Just as I was about to be taken, my sister, who had been forced to work in a factory since finishing middle school, saved me. "Take me instead," she said. "I'm older, I can have children right away. My sister still needs a few years. Wouldn't that be a loss for you?" At that time, my sister was already bringing money home, while I was still a financial burden. My father was not pleased, but when she managed to secure an additional $1,000 dowry on top of clearing his gambling debts, he reluctantly agreed. He hurriedly sent my sister away, fearing the men would change their minds. Before she left, she turned to look at my father and said coldly, "Let's sever ties then. Pretend you've never had a daughter like me." I remember my sister's first love being scared away by my father's antics at her factory. Subsequently, she was always shrouded in resentment. At that moment, my father was too busy counting his money to even raise his head to acknowledge her words. I didn't want to be taken away, nor did I want my sister to suffer for me. I clung to my sister, not letting her leave. However, my father picked me up and locked me in the bedroom, scolding me for not understanding the situation and ordering me to stay quiet. Through the soon-to-be closed door, I looked deeply at my father, seeing a stranger in place of the man I once knew. He was trading his daughter for money. I cannot describe the feeling, but my heart was filled with disappointment and sorrow. Now, as my father attempted to raise his hand to hit me, he thought better of it and tried to coerce me to join him. "Emma hasn't eaten yet. Come and eat with your father." With a swish of the mop, my mother placed herself between us, stating, "Rules cannot be broken. You said so yourself." My father's number flickered from 1 to 0, then back again. He withdrew his hand, not daring to say a word, and continued to blindly stuff the raw food into his mouth. Later, my mother handed me a bowl of white rice with pickles. "Women must not sit at the table, as it will affect the family's fortunes. Remember the Thompson family rules," she declared emotionlessly. For the first time, I found the house rules charming as I lowered my head and ate voraciously. I discreetly moved and saw my lifespan in the mirror had increased to 74 years, 5 months, and 18 days, even gaining 3 years of life. After that meal, my mother resumed her chores, washing dishes, tidying the room, and doing laundry. Meanwhile, my father vomited for half an hour before preparing to run away, but that door just wouldn't open, no matter what. Dad wanted to call the police, but realized there was no signal on his cell phone. Even if he mustered enough courage to jump from the 3rd floor, risking his life, the very next second, he'd find himself back in the room, even standing before Mom. Looking at Mom's face, already marked with livor mortis, Dad was so terrified he fainted, his eyes rolling back. I couldn't describe the rush of relief I felt seeing Dad fail repeatedly. It was unexpected to witness Mom standing up to him. I had advised Mom so many times before, urging her to leave Dad, but she always chose to suffer in silence. Mom was an exceptionally simple and naive person. She believed that as long as she could endure hardship and strive, life would eventually get better. That's why every day at 2:30 a.m. she woke to help Dad open the store, came back at 4:30 a.m. to prepare breakfast, tidy up the house, wash clothes, and after all that, she would still help in the store. It was clearly all thanks to Mom. Yet Dad acted as if he was our savior, as though everyone owed him something. Under Dad's continuous gaslighting, Mom stubbornly believed that she couldn't survive without him. I told Mom, even if she went out to wait tables, she could earn a couple of $1,000 a month. That was surely better than working to death every day, sleeping only 3 hours and receiving only $5 from Dad, which she had to put all back into household expenses. But Mom's response was, "What else could I do if I leave your father? Don't worry. With the family rules your father has set, your brother will surely be successful, and then I can live a good life." I haven't had the education, but I understand that only through extreme hardship can one become superior. It seems you still need to work harder on your studies. Mom used Dad's own words to refute me, and I was speechless. Mom practically idolized Dad. Even when he was deep in gambling debt, she supported him wholeheartedly. "Your father just had a failed investment. Investments come with risks. We are your father's family. We should support him silently from behind. What kind of person kicks him when he's down like you?" No matter how I explained that gambling was not an investment, she turned a deaf ear. After the incident with my sister, I told Mom everything while crying, seeking help, but she chose to believe Dad's lie. Grandma misses her. She asked for her to come back and keep her company. "What nonsense are you spouting, child? How could your father harm you?" "Your sister just called me. She said the air is so fresh in the countryside, everyone is much happier. And your father told me he won a small fortune, paid off his debts, and still has 20,000 left. Your father won't make such investments anymore, rest assured." Every time I heard Mom proudly defending Dad, my heart clenched. But considering how Mom always tried her best to protect my sister and me, it was under her protection that I could barely graduate from high school. So, I always wanted to take Mom away from this misery. Only after the incident with my sister did I feel forced to respect Mom's fate. But now, I've decided to help Mom and completely eradicate Dad, because more terrifying than a ghost is him. When Dad fainted from fear, my younger brother started throwing tantrums like a spoiled young master. He was too young to understand the dreadful state Mom was in now. He began shouting loudly, Mommy bad, Director Michael won't eat." He even shook Dad. "Dad, get up and hit Mom. She broke the family rules." Mom knelt before him, her eyes and brows revealing a touch of reluctance, seemingly regaining some sense of reality. "Michael, be good, listen. If Mommy is not around anymore, you can't be so willful." But my brother wasn't listening. Dad said, "I should be called Director Michael. You must respect me." Thinking about the new family rule, as if calling him Director Michael would lead to great success, Then might as well call me God of Fortune. I bet everyone's wishes would come true then. My brother's ravings made Mom grip his arm tighter and tighter. Director Michael cried out in pain. The numbers above his head fluctuated, showing that Mom was torn between the urge to kill and the sway of maternal love. Indecisive. The next moment, Mom grabbed Michael, rushed into the house, threw him in, and made him face the wall to think about what he'd done. She quickly slammed the door shut and locked it. "I'm your mother. The one who should know their place is you. If you don't change your temper, you'll suffer when you grow up," Mom said. It was the first time she tried to discipline Michael. Some truths she seemed to have slowly understood, but it was too late. She had already died. After dealing with my brother, she turned around and started doing laundry as if she didn't realize she was dead, still repeating her daily routine. It seems that if you're willing to endure hardship, you must bear it even in death. After cleaning the house, Dad finally came to just as Mom came back inside with a black garbage bag, sending Dad scurrying into a corner in fear. As Mom passed by me, I smelled the stench of a dead rat. Dad started to feel sick just from the smell. Not bothering with fear, he quickly got up, wanting to help in the kitchen. "You've been busy all day. Let me do the cooking. I'll do it." But Mom firmly kept him out. "You can't cook. Don't worry. I'll follow the rules and ensure a balanced diet, with no repeat recipes in 5 days." Dad was so frustrated he began muttering to himself about the rules, lifting his hand to his head in distress, which made Mom reflexively step back. "I'll follow the rules. Please don't hit me." With that, Mom hurried into the kitchen. I watched all this with a mix of irony and sympathy. Sure enough, Dad's dinner was a whole rat, not even skinned, so Dad cried through his meal. My brother, in a huff, refused to eat, and Mom didn't leave even a bite for him. My last bit of fear of Mom dissolved completely. I confidently went into the kitchen and fried 2 small dishes for myself, eating to my content. After a day of torment, Dad was a wreck as he went to bed. Mom, following the rules to the letter, brought him hot water for his feet, so hot it seemed freshly boiled. Mom grabbed Dad's feet and was about to immerse them when they seemed to gain supernatural strength. No matter how Dad struggled, he couldn't break free, and his feet were finally forced into the scalding water. Dad screamed in agony, ringing in my ears. Suddenly, with a burst of strength from who knows where, Dad broke free and kicked over the basin, cradling his scalded, blistering red feet on the bed. Mom, splashed with boiling water, seemed unfazed as she looked at Dad, the lights in the room flickering erratically. Her voice became piercingly sharp. "I can't sleep until I've washed your feet. Why won't you let me?" Dad, in pain, stumbled towards the door. Mom, carrying the foot bath, followed him step by step. In desperation, Dad ran into the kitchen, grabbed the rice container, and started throwing handfuls at Mom. But the most common rice made Mom freeze in place, looking around confused, unable to find Dad. Seeing the effectiveness of the rice, Dad regained his usual temper. He threw the rice container at Mom, venting his frustration. "You think just because you're a ghost, I'll be afraid of you? I advise you to let me go, or else I will make sure you turn to ash." I couldn't stand Dad's arrogance. I picked up a broom and swept the rice away from Mom's feet. Thompson family rule number 56, if you see dirt on the floor, clean it up immediately. Dad watched helplessly as I cleaned up the rice. Mom looked in Dad's direction, grinning. "Lao Shu, I found you," freezing his smile into a snarl. "You little brute, you don't help me, all these years of raising you for nothing." Dad had a rare moment of smart thinking. He smiled and lit the natural gas. "Eat raw food all the time. If you come any closer, believe me, we will die together." Dad lit sticks, towels, and such, throwing them mercilessly at Mom. Mom was hurt by the flames, black smoke rising from her, the burn area growing. She stood there, pained as if something was pulling at her, ready to shatter her to pieces. Dad, seeing some effect, used a spatula to place a whole roll of wet paper towels on the stove, which were damp and didn't catch fire immediately. In urgency, I remembered what Grandma used to say. Ghosts are most afraid of those who died with a grievance, and for a ghost, the best weapon is the resentment of the unappeased dead. Whispering the whole truth about my sister to Mom, she wasn't just sold by Dad, but also long since dead. After my sister was sold by Dad and Mom stubbornly disbelieved me, I could only attempt to contact my sister to ease my guilt. At first, my sister helped Dad lie, saying she was at Grandma's house, but later the phone was switched off permanently, and I always felt uneasy. After the university entrance exams, based on the information from the gambling den, I visited my sister's worthless husband's house, but there was no trace of her. I had a foreboding feeling and bravely asked about my sister's whereabouts. Glancing at me, they said with nonchalance, "Isabella Thompson is dead, long dead." I was kind enough to arrange a wedding for her, even got 7 or 8 brothers as groomsmen, but she didn't appreciate it and injured 2 of them in one night. I didn't even hold it against her, and the next day she jumped off a building. Looking for her? Go to the back mountain, you might still find a bone or 2. Laughing as if it was a hilarious joke, laughing with utter disregard, as though the one who died was not human, just an animal. I stood with my mouth open, speechless, feeling as if a massive stone pressed on my chest. I couldn't believe that my sister was no longer of this world. She was only 20 years old. A bunch of beasts. The beasts recognized me too, giving me malevolent looks. I pushed past them, running, just running. I ran until I was completely exhausted, but the words of those people continued to echo in my head. If it wasn't my sister, it would have been my fate. Every word they said seemed etched into my heart with a knife, tearing my soul to shreds. Now I recounted these words to Mom bit by bit. Mom seemed to regain a bit of her human consciousness. Isabella is dead? Then she shook her head stubbornly, her eyes full of denial. Impossible, absolutely impossible. I desperately called Grandma to ask how my sister was doing at Grandpa and Grandma's place. Grandma's cutting voice came through the phone. I miss her. Call her back to keep me company? I wish you all were dead sooner. The thought of you coming back makes me laugh. When I told Grandma the truth about my sister's death, the phone was filled with her choking laughter. Good that she's dead. Good. Even the fireballs that Dad finally managed to light had no effect on Mom. You owe my daughter her life. Mom got up and staggered towards Dad. No matter the flames or rice thrown by Dad, nothing could stop Mom's advance. And the number above her head was approaching 0. I knew the time had come. Mom reached Dad, hands around his neck. Her eyes bloodshot. She spoke each word deliberately. You said as long as I listened to you, you would make our lives better. But why did you kill Isabella? She was our child. Why won't you speak? Dad, terrified by Mom, lost all capability of reaction. A foul-smelling liquid flowing down his legs, forming a yellow puddle on the floor. He mumbled, unable to articulate a complete sentence, just kept begging Mom, I was wrong, forgive me. Suddenly, Mom pushed Dad towards the stove, and the flames instantly caught his clothes. The number above Dad's head dropped to 0. He turned into a ball of fire, screaming in agony as he rolled on the ground. The fire spread wherever Dad rolled. The blaze grew larger, but those flames couldn't reach within half a step of me. Mom slowly approached and embraced me. I'm sorry Mom was wrong to you, with those soft words of confusion. I reconstructed the truth about her death, just as I had guessed. After being knocked to the ground by a slap from Dad, Mom did indeed hit her head hard. As she lay motionless on the floor, Dad didn't even glance at her as he went off to sell sandwiches, leaving her alone to face death. The sister who had broken her phone quickly returned, accompanied by her husband, who came to pay. Not only did he cover the cost, but he also scolded himself for letting her come out alone in such cold weather, causing her phone to break and leaving her to walk home alone. He was worried sick about her. It was then that Mom realized what it felt like to be truly loved. As her body suffered from the heavy blows and severe blood loss, she succumbed to death. Dad, completely indifferent to Mom lying unconscious on the ground, complained about her laziness and inability to greet guests, lamenting how there was no peace at home and how his eldest daughter, despite having a good husband and several men at her service, had ended up committing suicide, leaving him without an excuse to borrow money from his son-in-law. Mom's spirit hovered in the air, following Dad as he reminisced with old gambling friends. Fueled by resentment, her spirit returned to her body and back home. Upon regaining consciousness, Mom's bloodshot eyes stared at me, her gaze as deep and unfathomable as an abyss. I remember everything now, she said. Your father is a beast, and I came back to kill him. He deserves to die. Meanwhile, Dad was engulfed in flames, his eyes revealing deep fear, regret, and helplessness, unable to utter a word of pain. As the fire grew, Dad gave up struggling, taking his last breath with reluctance. Mom then reached out, trembling, to touch my face, a tear of blood trailing down her cheek. If I had listened to you sooner, would everything be different? The thought of leaving you behind is what I dread the most, but thankfully you're smarter than I was, Mom said with a wistful smile filled with endless regret. I knew it was time to say goodbye. I wanted to hold her. Suddenly, the flames surged around me and the world spun. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing underneath our apartment building, gazing up at plumes of thick smoke billowing out. It wasn't a dream. The arrival of fire engines and ambulances confirmed the grim reality. I stood there, unsure of where to go. While the firefighters extinguished the blaze, it was apparent that both Mom and Dad were unrecognizable, burned beyond recognition. Michael, however, was more fortunate. The fire in his bedroom was less severe, and he had only passed out from smoke inhalation. I knew Mom had shown mercy, thankfully preventing the fire from spreading to our neighbors. When questioned by the police, I feigned tears and told them that Dad had killed Mom and had taken Michael and me in a suicide attempt out of guilt. Although the fire buried many truths, I was determined not to let a scumbag like Dad have an easy way out. Even in death, he deserved to be despised and condemned. I also told the police the true story of my sister's death, pleading for justice on her behalf. The medical examiner confirmed Mom's time of death to be at least 10 hours before the fire, corroborating my story and identifying my sister's killer. That piece of scum, responsible for my sister's death, was also involved in other homicides. His gambling den was an illegal establishment, and his so-called friends were all accessories to his crimes. They were sent to prison, where they could continue their so-called brotherly bonds. Looking up at the sky, I whispered, "Sister, Mom, you can rest in peace now." When Michael awoke, oblivious to what had happened, he lashed out at me, yearning for our mother. It was then that I did what I had long wanted to do. I slapped him and shouted, "Your mom is dead. Your dad is dead. And if you want to keep living, you better listen to me." Stunned by my outburst, Michael was left crying silently. I had neither the ability nor the obligation to care for him, so I sent him back to our grandparents, who had long cherished their grandson, even to the extent of cursing their granddaughter. With them, hopefully content with their precious grandson's return, I hurried away under the cover of night, leaving Michael, bound and gagged, at their doorstep, along with Dad's ashes. Back in the city, I quickly sold the fire-damaged house at a low price, gathering enough money to complete my education. After taking care of Michael and dealing with Dad's ashes, I found a peaceful resting place for Mom. I tidied up some of my sister's belongings, preparing to place a tombstone for her next to Mom. On the way to the cemetery, I encountered my grandparents' neighbor, who mentioned that ever since Michael returned, they had not known a day of peace. Michael was burning through their savings and eventually set their house on fire in a fit of rage. Now the grandparents, once doting over their grandson, were left without even a home to live in. As I was about to leave, I heard someone calling my name. Glancing over, I saw two frail old people and a boy pointing at me, shouting, "Sister is there!" I dashed away and hopped into a taxi, urging the driver to speed off, claiming my grandmother was trying to sell me to an old man. As we drove away, I looked back at my enraged grandparents and the cursing Michael. Checking their lifespans, I noted that my grandparents, once with 15 years ahead of them, now had less than one. Michael had 80 years ahead of him, a testament to the saying that evil lives long, though I wondered how much suffering he would endure alone. Exhausted, I slumped into my seat, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. It was well-deserved. Carrying my sister's belongings, I arrived at Mom's grave. Their suffering in life had been enough. This was their release. Sitting by the grave, I shared updates, telling them justice had been served, and I had gotten into a good university. As the clouds parted and the sun's warmth touched me, it seemed as if Sister and were listening and comforting me from afar. Breathing deeply, I relaxed completely. This was the taste of freedom. The end.